Continuing here our deep dive into the area of attention, our presentation here this morning from Rob Hall, the CEO of Playground XYZ. Rob is going to demonstrate how the application of attention signals can evolve the effectiveness and optimization of contextual advertising. Lovely welcome back to MeasureUp, Rob. Playground XYZ were the winners of last year's IAB MeasureUp Award for Best Advertising Effectiveness for their Attention Time report. So it's great to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome, and you're ready to go.
Awesome. Thanks again, everyone, and thanks, Mike, for all the kind words, and we feel the same about you guys. Peter touched on some really interesting stuff around context and how, I guess, creative and context can come together and have a synergistic effect to drive incrementality around both the short-term and long-term memory building and how that can lead to sales. So our discussion today is really a kind of deep dive around how we see attention metrics and contextual advertising coming together in quite an interesting way and in real time also. So Mike touched on this quickly, but the changing landscape around the deprecation of the third-party cookie does kind of present a need for advertisers to more seriously consider other options. And everyone asks this question of how they're going to identify people on the internet, post death of the cookie. We think the answer is you shouldn't be identifying people. People don't want to be identified. They don't want to be tracked. And really, this is giving rise to a bunch of alternate solutions that are really fascinating. One of them is, of course, contextual advertising. So it's having its time in the sun again, and it's about to really boom, we think. But it does have its challenges. And some of those are kind of things that you can look to solve with attention signals and create something pretty interesting. So when we talk about this, we give this example, like if you're a lipstick brand and you're told that through the death of the cookie, you need to do more contextual advertising, you would probably say, okay, I'm going to run context and I'll maybe go and create a list of keywords or content environments I want to be around. And I think to myself, well, I'm a lipstick brand, so I might be around beauty and makeup and lipstick environments. The problem is that you don't really know that those are the right places to put your ad. You intuitively think they are, and maybe you have some research from the past around focus groups or whatever. But you don't have the real-time feedback loop and the signals you need to say, okay, I'm delivering my ad into beauty environments. Is it working? And of course, on top of that, what if there are a whole bunch of other environments that are right for you, but you've started way too narrow? What if news was right, or gardening, or lifestyle, food? So you have this kind of conundrum where you're looking for ways to feel safe that you're moving away from targeting people with cookies and back into context, and to know that you are hitting the right audience and they're responding well to your advertisement and your creative. So attention signals can come in and kind of help with that. And we've got some interesting case studies we're going to walk you through today around that. Like Mike was mentioning, we have a metric called attention time, which is the length of time in seconds the ad is actually looked at. This is based off eye tracking panels and predictive models, AI models kind of combined to get to this score. A presentation for another day, perhaps that one. But effectively, once you can figure out how long someone's looked at an ad, you start to have a really powerful signal of what we call ad relevance. So if someone chooses to spend longer with your ad in an environment than other ads in that environment, you can kind of say that, holding other things equal, that people are looking at your ad more, and that you've picked up on an environment that's driving ad relevance and resonance with your brand. Mike kind of touched on this, but the power of attention-based metrics like this is pretty profound compared to things like viewability. If you're able to, measure the impact of attention time compared to viewability, it's like 7.5 times more potent at driving awareness and 5.9 times more potent at driving recall. So the juice is definitely worth the squeeze when we're going after more attention time. And It is, like I said, a very powerful feedback loop. And just to kind of really put the pin in the difference between this and something like viewability, if we were to take an L.com article and buy the same ad position and put 3 different creatives into that, we would see very little difference in viewability, because viewability is driven by the publisher and where they choose to place the ad slot and things like latency and load times. Whereas attention time is driven by the consumer. Yes, some of those other factors feature in it, definitely, but incremental attention time is a voluntary thing of a consumer stopping and spending time with your ad. And that's the signal we want to pick up together. So we're kind of talking about this thing called the context attention loop. And really it's about saying, look, here's a way that advertisers can move into context and use attention signals to kind of know they're doing the right stuff. So effectively, you know, you got to start somewhere. Hey, I've got an audience, so I want to match it into some starting context. Then you use the signals to measure which are driving the most attention time on your ad. And then finally, you optimize to those contexts that are performing the best. So walking you through that example, what we do here is sort of say, okay, you know, you are after females 25 to 44 who are fashionable and into pop culture. This looks like a reasonable search space. Let's call it a search space to begin. Now, you don't want to start too narrow here. You don't want to start too broad. In kind of optimal terms, you start more broad, definitely. And then what you do is you start delivering your creative. And what we're doing with clients is saying, okay, your ad is landing on all these URLs. And we are running a separate asynchronous process where we say, okay, on this URL, what do we know about it? And we're using a natural language processing engine to understand what's sitting behind that URL in terms of contextual categories and keywords. And then we're able to categorize these URLs into buckets. Here's these articles about beauty. These articles are about body care. These are about fashion and so on. And then you're able to overlay the attention time that the ad is getting in those environments and start to see some really interesting stuff like, okay, my ad is over-indexing in beauty TV shows, but it is under-indexing in relationships and fragrances. So that's fascinating insight that, of course, has profound kind of, you know, implications beyond the campaign you're running. It's stuff that you can use, you know, very broadly. What's interesting then is, and Mike was touching on this too, is, you know, we're into this world of real-time, you know, optimization now too. So via DSPs and SSPs, being able to actually take this data and do something with it. So what you could do is things like, okay, if I'm under indexing in body care, perhaps we should stop serving the ads there. And if I'm over indexing in fashion, we want to put more impressions there, and same with beauty. So it's kind of a feedback loop, and a, you know, it's discover, you know, validate, and then optimize, and the loop goes round. So I'm going to walk you through a case study now, and this one is for Suzuki, car brand, and yeah, they basically had 2 vehicles, and and a Swift and Vitara, so 2 different creatives, and you kind of wanted to deliver this, and we measured the attention time, and then we wanted to optimize it. So what was fascinating about this was, as we ran the natural language processing engine over the top, you started to see some really, really interesting stuff about how the 2 different vehicles deviated across different environments. So the Suzuki Swift is kind of more urban and female skewed and kind of urbanite, and the Vitara is kind of a little more SUV based, I think, and maybe a little more family oriented and maybe slightly male skewed. And you can start to see these things come out. So the Swift did better in food and drink, beauty and fitness, whereas the Vitara started doing better in games, did better in auto and vehicles, and jobs and education, computer electronics. So what this shows and proves is that 2 different creatives with this, you know, from the same advertiser because they had the 2 creatives had 2 kind of inherent audiences sitting behind them. And those audiences appear in different contexts. and you're able to pick up the signal of which contexts and which audiences in those contexts are resonating with your creative and which aren't. So by then sort of optimizing to the context for each of those vehicles, so they started getting delivered into different places, you're able to act as a kind of pre-bid filter, and only buy the impressions and the context where the ad is resonating the most. Things like that can get you a huge lift in attention time. And that drives subsequent lifts, and this is Mike's point and Peter's point, subsequent lifts in things like other behaviors that we care about, not only clicks, but importantly, conversions, and from conversions into sales and all of that stuff too. So what we're looking for here is a strong linear relationship between these kind of uplifts from the optimized to the non-optimized portions. So if I kind of wrap that up and then I'm done, really, this is a new frontier, which we think is really interesting and being driven by the deprecation of the cookie is driving a need for a change in both how you target and how you measure. And things like the context attention loop provide a solution for both of those, which is fascinating. The learnings are that brands, as they move to context, are often too restrictive, and we should definitely be starting more broad with a bigger search space. The second thing is that metrics like viewability aren't great signals at all of ad effectiveness. They're great signals that you have the opportunity to be seen, but they're driven by the publisher and the placement mostly. Whereas attention signals are very great feedback loops of ad relevance, and we should be using these to validate we're in the right context. And finding the right context does matter, because when we do optimize the creative into the right environments, we do get lifts, and those lifts are translating into business outcomes. So that's me. The best thing of all I wanted to finish on is there's no identifiers. And, as an industry, if we could build these solutions in this way and give a nod to consumers and the way they want privacy to be treated, that's kind of a win for everyone. Thanks, guys.